Good morning, dear colleagues. We have the responsibility and the pleasure with Mrs. Marsela Demaj to coordinate this morning session. And the first paper will be delivered by the keynote speaker, Kanaki, who is expert in international law in the Ministry of Tourism. Because she is ill, unless COVID is attacking again all of us, her paper will be read by Sboryanovo. So I give the word to Safo.
Dear participants, good morning. I'm going to read the presentation of Mrs. Georgia Kanaki. The demand for a sustainable and greener economy is increasing all over the world as our planet is confronted with threats such as devastating results of climate change, pollution, and urbanization. Natural landscapes, cultural monuments, and sites are endangered by human activity of all kinds, from industrial pollution to tourism, that do not respect the natural space and resources and that poses serious threat to biodiversity. So, the question that arises is, should all human activity be banned on protected natural sites and on areas with open-air monuments? Is this a viable solution for a modern society dealing with the abandonment of rural areas, high unemployment rates, and the challenges of climate change? Of course not. The aim is to find and apply sustainable and viable solutions for all stakeholders, so there will be a win-win situation for everyone involved. At European Union level, strong legislation has been in place for more than 20 years to try to stem the loss of Europe's biodiversity through, amongst others, the establishment of the Europe-wide network of protected sites. Natura 2000 sites are not against the development of tourism. On the contrary, Natura 2000 embraces a much wider concept of conservation and sustainable use, which is largely centered on people working with nature rather than against it. Since every site is unique, the emphasis is very much on finding local solutions to local management issues in close cooperation with landowners, stakeholders, local authorities, and other interesting parties. The Natura 2000 network currently contains over 27,500 sites among 28 member states and covers in total more than 18% of the European Union land territory, as well as some 9% of the surrounding European Union seas. Moreover, 27 natural and mixed World Heritage sites in the European Union overlap fully or significantly with Natura 2000 sites. From these figures, one can easily understand that tourism should be banned from these territories, especially when taking into account the economic impact of tourism in Europe. Tourism contributes 10% to European Union gross domestic product and employs 20 million people, which is equivalent to 9% of European Union employment. Some natural and cultural destinations, especially World Heritage sites and famous national parks, have become a magnet for tourism. They are now struggling to cope with the influx during high season while securing enough visitors during shoulder or off-season. Some destinations have had to make drastic measures to reduce the volume of tourism and the damage they cause, for example, Santorini and Pompeii. So, how can tourism be developed within natural heritage and cultural sites? What are the threats and the opportunities for tourist activities in protecting landscapes? Starting from the threats, if tourism is not developed in a sustainable way, it could contribute to the deterioration of natural and cultural monuments. Mass tourism is defined as a form of tourism that attacks numerous crowds of tourists that fill or exceed a destination capacity. This popular form of tourism usually goes along with the water scarcity issues, especially in the Mediterranean region, energy-consuming practices, waste management problems, and the alteration of the landscape. According to the European Commission report of 2019 on natural and cultural heritage in the Mediterranean and Central Eastern and Southeastern Europe, alteration in water availability and humidity or severe weather elements such as heavy rainfall and flooding associated with climate change are the most cited negative factor affecting World Heritage Sites. Not surprisingly, unsustainable tourism and recreation comes out as the most frequent threat for both, followed by infrastructure development, urbanization, and unsustainable agriculture or agricultural abandonment. So, how can tourism be practiced on World Heritage Sites? First of all, tourism within protected natural and cultural sites requires a holistic approach that takes into account the preservation of the region's natural resources and biodiversity, the use of environmentally friendly sources of energy, and the special characteristic of the landscape during the spatial planning procedures. It also requires respect for the area's population, the intangible cultural heritage, and the socio-economic status of the society that is living within the boundaries of the protected landscape. The natural and cultural sites can benefit to a great extent from the development of alternative types of tourism, such as wildlife tourism, cultural tourism, pilgrimage tourism, and agro-tourism, just to mention a few. The demand for these types of tourism has grown significantly over the years, and recent market surveys reveal that more and more people are interested not only in trying out new places, but also in discovering different forms of tourism that emphasize on quality products and more environmentally conscious activities. These forms of tourism can promote different tourist types of employment for the local population, especially by offering incentives for the younger generation to remain or return to rural areas that have been abandoned for decades. Small and medium-sized enterprises offer a great scope of job opportunities for those wishing to start a business in areas far from the great cities or the renewed mass tourism destination. The diversification and stabilization of the local economy could help to improve local living standards and encourage a greater understanding and sympathy for the restoration and protection of their local heritage. This can be especially relevant for rural areas and small villages across Europe that are struggling to remain live and where there is a high depopulation rate. If the villages die out, so does the area's heritage. The economic benefits of tourism in protected sites tourism can also be seen as an innovative stimulant for growth and employment in a wide range of sectors and is recognized as a major contributor to social cohesion and engagement as a way of bringing together communities and stimulating young people to engage with their environment. Cultural and natural heritage come together in defining the character and identity of rural areas that can help to protect and maintain them as places where people want to live, work, and visit, and offers new opportunities for branding and marketing local products and services. Some heritage features are quite robust, whilst others are so sensitive to human pressure that they may not be able to cope with other disturbances. Much can be done through identifying carrying capacities for sites and zoning people away from sensitive areas, while still ensuring a good visitor experience, but this is a very complex issue and one that needs to be carefully developed on a case-by-case basis. As heritage-based tourism and recreation is much an important and growing sector, it is worth paying special attention to the issue when considering site management and protection. So, one of the most important steps towards the sustainable development of tourism within natural and cultural heritage sites is to establish a legal network and protect these sites and oblige the potential tourists entrepreneurs to comply with the existing regulations. This presupposes spatial recognition of existing natural and cultural heritage features. Unfortunately, natural and cultural heritage features are all too often overlooked in wider developed activities because of a lack of available spatial data. Sometimes, there is also a lack of political will and a more integrated territorial development objective. Some may only take natural and cultural heritage on board if they are obliged to or if they are in a legally binding component of decision-making procedures such as for the Natura 2000 network. Collaboration between government entities is vital for tourism development that embraces the interests of all stakeholders involved, the protected sites, the local population, and the tourist entrepreneur who intend to invest in a project of tourist interest. All too often, the government entities across Europe have a tendency to develop their policies, priorities, and legislative structure independently of each other, putting the documents out to consultation only during the last stages of their development cycle. Often, this turns into an exercise of damage limitation, focusing on lose-lose scenarios rather than a search of synergies and win-win solutions. This negative phenomenon is emphasized even more when taking into account that natural and cultural policies are usually the responsibility of different authorities at local, regional, or national level that do not coordinate with each other and that very often have different priorities. For example, in Greece, the Ministry of Culture is responsible for the preservation of cultural monuments. The Ministry for the Environment stresses the importance of preserving the protected areas of the Natura 2000 network, whilst the Ministry of Tourism focuses more on the potential tourist revenues from the exploitation of the area and the economic benefits for the local population. Unfortunately, this is not limited to Greece, but is also the case for other countries in Europe. The lack of cooperation between the competent authorities and land use plans that do not take into consideration the aspects of the biodiversity and the specific traits of areas of increased natural and cultural interest constitute an important disincentive for the potential entrepreneur who wishes to invest in protected areas. The attraction of investment is usually high on the political agenda because of the benefits they bring with them, job opportunities and increased tourist revenues. On a more concrete level, tourist development within protected sites of natural and cultural interest should incorporate the principle of sustainability of the natural resources and have specific plans for waste management. As mentioned above, mass tourism facilities are associated with increased water consumption, which could pose a threat to the water supply of an area. Mass tourism also produces an increased amount of waste. Taking these parameters into account, tourism in protected sites of natural and cultural interest should be developed in harmony with the landscape-specific traits. For example, golf courses demand tons of tons of water in order to operate and usually alter the pre-existing natural landscape. As a result, the tourist establishment wishing to operate a golf course in an area where water supply is scarce should take measures so as not to aggravate the already existing problem, or should reconsider their plans by developing more environmental friendly types of activities. In other words, tourism development must be carefully planned to ensure sustainable benefits are shared in an equitable manner. Preventive or mitigating measures should be put in place to avoid well-known risks that come with popularity. Erosion of heavily used paths, damage to habitats, the monuments, site pollution, accidental fires, vandalism, a disturbance to wildlife resulting from irresponsible behavior, and fossilization and over-commercialization of local traditions and lifestyles which can destroy their value and authenticity. Developing a tourism activity can be complex. Tourism is a competitive and dynamic business based on free market principles and dominated by information and promotional techniques. Developing tourism activities based on natural and cultural heritage in rural areas present a number of additional challenges. The destination management organization may have fewer resources to conceive local business to engage in such a new occupation. Rural areas might suffer from a lack of skills, experience, money, and institutional support to help start up specialized tourism-related business. Being far from big urban centers is both an asset and an impediment for heritage features. Pooling resources is one answer to heritage features that are too few in a specific area. Another important step towards the sustainable management of tourist activities within protected areas is to incorporate the local community. This may include the work carried out to protect the traces from erosion or vandalism, the taking of visitors out to see the traces as part of a local cultural tourism venture. Part of the income generated from tourism should go to those who protect and maintain the heritage feature upon which the tourism is based. Tourism and respect of the natural landscape and the preservation of cultural or natural monuments are not incompatible with each other. Tourism can help these sites not only by contributing to their financing, but also by creating jobs and increasing the total tourist revenue of the area. The revenues from developing sustainable types of tourism in cultural and natural sites can help with their financing, contributing to their protection, so the future generation can enjoy their beauty. Because we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Thank you.
We thank Mrs. Georgia Kanaki for the interesting presentation, and we wish her to be in good health very soon. Now I'm pleased to invite to the floor Professor Diana Gergova, my co-coordinator of this session. She is a professor of archaeology in the National Institute of Archaeology in Bulgaria and ICOMOS expert. Her presentation is entitled The Cultural and Natural Heritage of Sboryanovo National Reserve, Problems of the Management and Proposal of a New Model. Please, Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank sincerely to the organizers of the conference for the possibility to participate and to share with you some problems of the one of the most important archaeological reserves in Bulgaria, where I have been excavating almost for 40 years, since 1982. Why Sboryanovo? The name of the reserve is very interesting because This means a place for religious festivals. In fact, on the historical map of the Thracian tribes of 1st millennium BC, they are the most numerous people after the Indians, according to Herodotus, and the Getae were one of the most famous prophets, Orphics, and Pythagoreans, practicing the rites of immortalization. They had the territory, as you can see, on both banks of the Danube River. Sboryanovo is in northeast Bulgaria, and as I said it means a meeting place for religious festivals, so this was the original name which we found there when we started our investigations. The discovery of the Sveshtari tomb in 1982 was a scientific challenge. Why so far to the north from the territory of the great concentration of Macedonian tombs we find this tomb? The question was followed by large-scale interdisciplinary investigations with wide intensive international collaboration in this area of great concentration of archaeological monuments. Here you can see the Sveshtari tomb, which was listed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1985. It is very unique with its sculptural, painted, and architectural decoration, also with its planning with a lateral chamber, which is also something different than the traditional tombs with semi-vaulted roof in Macedonia. What is also interesting, it is unique with the naiscus in front of the bed of the king, separating the interior of the chamber from the most sacred part, where the mystery of the immortalization should happen. Here you can see the naiscus, which at the moment is not even restored in its entity, and our project to the left, how it should be exhibited. Another very interesting specific feature was the orientation of the axis of the tomb along the direction of the winter solstice, when the sun rays were reaching the scene of immortalization. So when we started the investigations after the discovery of this tomb, we saw a very great concentration of archaeological sites situated in the valley and on the high banks of the Krapinets River, which was full with a case with materials of prehistoric Thracian and medieval period. At the same time, this is the first place from the Danube River where we have water springs, and even now the area is supplying with water great parts of the northeast Bulgaria. So this mystic, landscape was connected also with dense oak forests full of game deers because of the neighboring Voden governmental hunting reserve. We have protected flowers in the early spring, for example, this Cyclame and Kum, and Sboryanovo is part of the Natura 2000 ecological network of protected areas. What is important to say that after these long-term excavations, we revealed the religious and political center of the Getae, the prophets, from the 1st millennium BC. It is a complex of sanctuaries, cult places, Hellenistic town, and more than 120 tumuli surrounding the group of sanctuaries. Its apogee was in the early Hellenistic period. The complex was preliminarily planned in harmony with the mystic nature and according to the Orphic teaching in the immortality of the soul. Here you can see the map with the situation of the tumuli of the Hellenistic town of several sanctuaries. What is important to say and what is interesting is that astronomic knowledge, what is applied also in the planning of the groups of tumuli as mirror reflections of the brightest constellations, Canis Major, Orion, Sagittarius, etc. According to Professor Yanni Liritsis from University of Rhodes, they were imitating the Milky Way, the path of the souls. The data about kings, priests, and god of the Getae, Zalmoxis, a slave or predecessor of Pythagoras, who was teaching the astral immortality, makes understandable the astronomical and mathematical knowledge applied here. Most probably, we believe that we discovered Daus Dava, the city of the wolves or the city of the Dacians, on Tabula Nona of Claudius Ptolemaeus. So the Sveshtari tomb was included in the UNESCO list in 1985. In 1988, Sboryanovo was declared as a national reserve. In 2016, the Ministry of Culture defined it as the most important reserve in the country with great potential as a factor for development of tourism and sustainable development. What are the main investigations and discoveries? Here you can see the Hellenistic town on the hill, which we believe can be identified with the polis Hellis. It is known from the moralizing story of Diodorus as the polis of the Getian king Dromichaites, who organized their symposium after his victory over Lysimachus in the beginning of 3rd century BC. You see the contacts of the town with many centers of the Aegean and North Pontic area. What we did was to continue the excavations of the eastern royal necropolis, and in the northern group of tumuli under the sign of Canis Major, we proved the existence of an architectural complex of 3 tombs, the Sveshtari tomb and 2 tombs with sliding doors, something specific only for this part of the Balkans. So this complex of burials was identified with the burial of Dromichaites in the Sveshtari tomb from the first half of 3rd century BC, and his family or some of his assistants. You can see here these unique sliding doors. And after that, our investigations continued in the southern group of the same royal necropolis, where the tumuli are under the sign of Orion. All the tumuli are dated to the only beginning of 4th century BC and reveal the burials of the earlier Getic king Kotila from the second half of 4th century BC and members of his family. I would only like to say that in all the different tumuli, we have different burial rites. Usually the 2 royal tombs of Dromichaites and Kotila, they were connected with burials by inhumation, but with reburied bones, which is typical for the Orphic myth about the dismembering of Orpheus and immortalizing of the soul. The other burials were by incinerations, indicating that different types of tombs and different types of burials correspond to the different social status of the buried persons. Here I can show you these unique results of the excavations of the highest tumulus. You can see it was 20 meters high, and we found a very much destroyed by an earthquake tomb with proto-Doric columns with some parallels in Pella. And what was interesting, we found that a very big oak tree was covered also by the same tumulus. Later, we could find that in the crown of this tree was put a special oak chest with a lot of golden objects. I would like to say that the identification of this tumulus, you can see here some traces of this oak tree and the place where the box with golden objects was installed. Here we found a diadem, 2 pairs of bracelets, necklaces, a ring, horse harness, appliques, and brocade. And you can see the first image of another, how to say, creature. I call it satyres. Here are the applications. So these are about 300 objects, and the weight is a little bit less than 2 kilos. And for me, it was very important, the unusual place where this box was found. So it was put not only in the crown of the oak tree, but it was also put on the second face of the piling of the tumulus as gifts to the gods. I would like to say that Kotela was a very interesting person because in 339, he signed an agreement with Philip II against the Scythians, and then he gave his daughter Meda for the next wife of Philip after the mother of Alexander. You know that there is a discussion that maybe Meda, according to some specialists, was buried exactly in Vergina. There are also some other suggestions, but anyway, we find another proof of very interesting political relationships between the Macedonian and the Getic state. What was the next interesting was that here we found also unique monuments illustrating the relationships of the Getic kingdom with the Celts. We found first in one of the tumuli around the tumulus of Kotela, we found the Celtic chariot, which you can see in tumulus 27. With a very specific way of bearing the horses, which is typical only for the necropolis of the Getae. We are working with a French paleozoologist, and he says that nowhere in the world he had found such positions, and this is another symbol and sign of the idea of the Getae that there was no death, that life continues. You can see the way in which this chariot was buried. Here is the specific way in which the horses were sacrificed. And here you can see that the parallels of this chariot are from the area of Paris. So you can imagine a chariot, Celtic chariot coming from mid of West Europe to the capital of the Getae. The next thing which also found, which was also extremely interesting because it is again for the first time on the Balkans, under another tumulus we found the very popular type of Shirikfansen. These are the Celtic sanctuaries, very typical for the Celtic world, but this is for the first time on the Balkans. It is with a rectangular form and some gifts in the ditches. So there is a very interesting information by Alexandrian authors that the Zalmoxis was the person that thought the Celtic druids into the ideas of immortality. So for us it is very interesting because we can see a place where most probably these cultural and spiritual connections could be realized. What I'd like to say that if we found really the very interesting political and religious center of the Getae with the concentration of sanctuaries, town, tumuli, which is a perfect example for not only for cultural contact, but mainly also for cosmic landscape. What is interesting that you can see here the boundaries of the reserve and the materials from different epochs. We have the tradition of the sacred place throughout the millennia. So first we have the expressions of Orphic ideas. After that we have the cult to the Thracian horsemen from the Roman period. After that we have a Christian settlement with a small church from 10th century and a very interesting encolpia. After that we have from this territory interesting monument of Xhaina, which is connected already with the Bulgarians who were sharing different religions. And we have the interesting example with the teke of Demir Baba. He was a Bulgarian Alevian. And you can see that this teke was built on the top of the Thracian step altar. Finally, we have living Indo-European traditions. You see, this is the dressing of the mother goddess, a lot of bands and different rituals. So means that Indo-European traditions have remained and have been practiced even now in this territory. So we have tangible and we have intangible heritage, and we have also the extremely interesting continuation and, how to say, presentation of different monuments connected with different religions, united maybe by the universalism already of the Orphic ideas. What I wanted to say is how to preserve and manage this diverse and important cultural natural heritage is a big problem. We have many labels, as you see, UNESCO, Natura 2000, Ministry of Culture, etc., etc. But nevertheless, any development of the reserve, only 4 of the sites can be visited, and the conservation of none of them have been even finished. We prepared many projects for conservation and restoration and for a museum of the Getty culture, the spiral of time, having the intention to show this specific northern Thracian culture in one place, characteristic for the both banks of the Danube. The problem is that the extremely slow development of the Sboryanovo Reserve and of all archaeological reserves in rural areas is due to the introduced in 2009 new cultural legislation. The regional structures for immovable heritage, which were corresponding to F4A's autosopritendents in Italy, were destroyed, and all responsibilities were given to the local administration or local museums, thus placing the preservation system in dependence of the often changing political tendencies and moods. Many possibilities for participation in European projects for funding could not be used because of the lack of interest and understanding of the administration, and also the lack of an adequate structure to apply. That is why, with a team of archaeologists, specialists in cultural legislation, museologists, and a businesswoman, Gergova, Professor Kabakov, Professor Petev, and Milena Prodanova, studying the Sboryanovo case, we proposed to introduce the model of participatory governance of cultural heritage that is new for the Republic of Bulgaria. Although there are many also European documents in the recent years encouraging exactly the development of these approaches. So it is based on a partnership. Between various stakeholders with publicly justifiable interest. The conceptual framework of the model is the result of a research project funded by the America for Bulgaria Foundation. Why is a new model needed? The status of a UNESCO World Heritage Site obliges the public authorities to draw up and adopt a plan for protection and management and a detailed development plan of the Sboryanovo Reserve and the Sveshtari Tomb. However, such plans have not been prepared for decades now. The reserve does not have a long-term development program for the coming 10 or 20 years. The physical remoteness of the Ministry of Culture, the exclusive owner of the reserve, has led to some systematic problems. The current long-standing, inefficient, and bureaucratic model of governance leads to blurring of the responsibility for the condition of the monuments, impossibility to prioritize the needs of the archaeological research and to carry out the necessary conservation interventions in a timely, efficient, and professional manner. As a result, over the years, some irreversible destructive processes on the heritage in the reserve took place. You could see how diverse are and different are the needs of the preservation of each category of monuments. Unfulfilled potential of the reserve to attract diverse audiences and present its wealth, remarkable sound on the territory, are available for visits for the general public, only some of them. Lack of implementation of the principles of management and return on financial, social, and other investments required by the Bulgarian cultural heritage law, but never controlled. These problems and challenges presuppose the elaboration and discussion of a fundamentally new model, namely the model of participatory governance of the Sboryanovo Reserve that is realized through partnership between various stakeholders with publicly justified interests. Of course, the role of the professional structures continues to be the most important. What is participatory governance? It is a form of activation and enabling of stakeholders in the field of cultural heritage who have legitimate interest to joint governance of the protection and socialization of the heritage. Although such partnership in governance of the cultural heritage site as cultural organization with mixed participation is possible even according with the current Bulgarian legislation, there have not been any examples of that in the country, and such governance models are now typical more for the Anglo-Saxon countries and some places in Western Europe. That legal status sets optimal conditions for sustainable development and effective management and protection of the reserve. The structure of the organization with mixed participation, which we proposed as a self-organization of verified legitimate stakeholders in governance of the reserve, the study proposes tentatively the establishment of a General Assembly composed of very legitimate stakeholders that will emit two autonomous structures, the Board of Directors and the Control Board, who will govern the reserve. The Board of Directors will appoint an Executive Director and a Senior Operating Officer. The Constituent Act should establish as well how such a representative would partner or equal footing with the Ministry of Culture and the Municipality of Nessebar, whose interests are also represented by legitimate representations. Financial framework. A key presumption in the new model is that the budget of the Sboryanovo Reserve is an independent of the budget of the local history museum of Nessebar. I would like to say that our investigation showed that, for example, the annual budget of the museum is 750,000 leva, but almost 85% of this money was used for the personnel of the museum, and only 15% were reinvested in some activities. So this is absolutely inefficient model. Against, of course, we made the proposal of this model. The model implies the creation of a long-term development program, a key document based on a fundamentally new and more sustainable approach. The participation of diverse key structures in the new governance model, such as Ministry of Culture, the municipality, the museum, and other professional and non-governmental organizations, would enable the participation of the Sboryanovo Reserve in the full range of available financial development programs. The analysis of financial data collected from preliminary studies indicates that the model of participatory governance in Sboryanovo will be financially appropriate and effective to achieve its goals. It can be expected that the new model will start generating positive financial results within 3 to 5 years from its establishment. Applicability of the model. The Sboryanovo Reserve has the characteristic and typical problems of all historical and archaeological reserves with the status of an exclusive state property in the Republic of Bulgaria. If the archaeological reserves on the territories of different towns did not have this problem, as we saw the politics of the Nessebar community, the problem of these reserves in rural areas are the same. That is why we consider that our model could be applied to the organization and governance of each of the archaeological reserves in the country, provided that it is modified according to their specificity and competitive advantage. Discussions have been already organized with colleagues and with the Ministry of Culture, and the results were very positive. And the next discussion will be the next week on Tuesday in the Ministry of Culture. It will be followed by the experimental application of the model at several selected reserves, Sboryanovo and maybe 2 or 3 others. Thus, we hope that soon Sboryanovo will appear as a partner in the next projects concerning monuments and nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gergova, for the presentation of such fascinating results of this 40-year research. I wish you success in your further work for valorizing and making this wonderful site visitable. I would like now to welcome Dr. Bushi Xhaferaj. She is specialized in Byzantine religious art and art restorer in the Department of Artworks, mural painting, fresco technique in the National Institute of Cultural Heritage in Albania. Her presentation is entitled Exploring History, Architecture and Art in Albania Through a Religious Itinerary. Dr. Era, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marsela. Albania constitutes a rich country regarding archaeological resources. Besides very renowned sites such as Butrint, Apollonia, Voulellis, etc., which attract a large number of tourists every year, special attention is focused to the numerous religious monuments. Christian churches, with their rich architectural and artistic formulas and diversity, have been proved rich points of reference in the exploration and explanation of historical stages of the country. Their date happens to coincide with a crucial moment in the development of architecture and art, and their iconographic and stylistic characteristics are such as to enable scholars to draw numerous and varied connections with monuments of other periods and regions. Besides their significance and contribution to general problems concerning medieval history, they are also evaluated and considered for their rich touristic potential and contribute not only to the presentation of history to the tourist, a time of medieval history actually, a time when the church became the most powerful and influential institution, but also to the definition and establishing of an elite and qualitative tourism, ensuring a unique experience through the combination between the beauties of nature, adventure, education, and knowledge. From this point of view, Albania is represented from distinct categories of religious objects which were built in different historical periods, offering a complete panorama to the stages of development of church architecture and art. This article will focus on Byzantine monuments from 5th to 14th century. Its aim is twofold. First, it will present the major and most important buildings during this particular time span, mainly based on the most representative monuments, demonstrating that the care for and energy invested in the Christian temples does not only testify to continuance of aesthetic principles and representational concern, not only at Constantinople, but also in the provincial capitals and even in the smaller cities of the region. Second, it will emphasize that their integration in the extant or new touristic itineraries contribute to the enrichment of touristic offer in Albania. The number of Paleo-Christian basilicas has increased enormously in Albanian territory thanks to the spectacular results of excavations rendered in all its parts. These buildings, with spacious interiors suitable for the accommodation of large number of faithful and lavishly decorated with bright multicolor mosaic pavements, are documents or emphasize the development and flourishing of late ancient cities, some of them having the status of episcopal centers. Early Byzantine mosaic pavements, as integral parts of the decoration of these churches, distinguished for the depiction of geometrical and zoomorphic designs and bucolic scene, predominant motifs familiar in the Balkan setting. The most important examples are presented in the mosaic floor from the castle of Berat, the mosaic of Apollonia, the extramuros mosaic of the Basilica of Bezistane in Elbasan, here, the mosaic of the Church of St. Michael in Arapai, of course, the mosaic of Lin, of Antigonea, and of course, the rich complex of the mosaic pavements decorating the basilicas in the city of Voulellis. These are some. Certain stylistic and compositional aspects, such as the similar technique employed in the rendering of the pavements, the reproduction of geometrical patterns, linear flat style and lack of perspective, etc., are amongst the characteristics referring to close cultural relationship with mosaic floors throughout Mediterranean territories, and especially in Balkan countries, and beyond with North Africa and Southern Italy, with which close trade and subsequent economic, cultural, and historical contacts are proved through archaeological material as well in late antiquity. Besides mosaic, another genre of art is cultivated during this period, that of mural painting. The fresco painting decorating the walls of the crypt, or one of the most emblematic settings from the monastery of Forty Saint, are the most representative surviving examples. The murals preserve two layers, the earliest dating to 5th century, and the second layer depicting thematics inspired from the New Testament, such as the call of the first disciples and the representation of Christ and other scene. This is a rebuking scene, very rare, actually. Another rare example constitutes the fresco decorating the lower part of the sanctuary of Extramuros Basilica of Elbasan, which depicts a stylized double-headed eagle rendered in black color. While a considerable number of monuments dates in Paleo-Christian period, is noted a distinct absence of material sources belonging to the successive 8th and 9th century. A special contribution to the study of post-iconoclastic painting in Albania provides the fresco decorating the cave church in the village of Koshorish. This is the cave church. It's a tiny room which is reached through a small circular opening. The murals occupy the upper part of the cave and depict the representation of an orange virgin with a miniature portrait of Donor's family and Christ Pantocrator, formerly dated by Theophan Popa in late 10th, early 11th century. The inscription here indicates the artist engaged in the painting and probably the hermit of the cave church. The 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries are undoubtedly a crucial period in the Albanian history, matched by further flourishing of cultural centers such as the cities of Durrës, Berat, Korça, Vlora, etc., and the dynamic appearance in the historical scene of local nobility, manifested particularly in religious private patronage. This local aristocracy gradually affirmed itself as a political, economic, and social factor, contributing also to spiritual matters of the community. The investigation of monumental painting patterns offers important data concerning the process of the historical metamorphosis of local nobility from tribal leaders to independent dynasts. Eminent members of this class, either secular or religious, became the main supporters of artistic creativity. Their relations with Constantinople and other spiritual or cultural centers influenced the iconography. The involvement also in church erection and ornamentation influenced the iconographical program and its ideological contents profoundly. Different workshops were invited to work and fulfill the demands and tastes of their patrons, inheriting impressive artistic creation both in terms of style and ideas. The prevailing church architecture during this time was the crossing square type, adapted at least from 10th century in Albania, as resulted from the recent excavation in the church of Asomatos in Vlora River. The most representative monuments of this group are the Church of Marmiro, the Church of St. Mary Kosina, Xhaferaj, the Catholicon of the Monastery of Nativity of the Virgin, Church of Holy Trinity in Berat, the Church of Christ Zodotes, and other churches also belonging to the same architectural typology. Also, another distinct typology constitutes the three islet basilicas, such as the Basilica of St. Nicholas in the village of Peronti. So we have at least two typologies in the 13th century, from 11th to 13th century. Following the inclusion of these territories under the cultural and religious influence of Archbishopric of Ohrid in 1334, and the breaking of their traditional relationship with Constantinople is an event that affected the nature of buildings and art. During this time, besides the crossing square type, another model show up a modest and a quite comprehensive architecture of small single-aisle chapels, timber-roofed or vaulted, such as the Church of St. Mary in Golombocz, St. Mary in Maligrad, St. Mary in Cerska, St. Demetrius, Boboshtica, etc. Following Dušan's death in 1355 and the disintegration of his empire, these territories experienced the domination of successive rulers, as Simon Uroš, Kralj Vukašin, and the despot Andrew Muzaki II, which names appear in the historical sources of the time or in the painted description of these churches, as we will see. Generally, church architecture and its sculpted decoration borrow Western elements, while the painting is more persistent to Byzantine iconographic and ideological concepts. What means that the representation of saints and the spirit generally remain faithful to Byzantine models and tradition. Some of the most important examples of 12th century painting constitute the fragmentary frescoes of the Church of Marmiro in Noricum, and the first phase of the painting at the Catholicon of the Monastery of Nativity in Apollonia, which manifests high-quality standards in the monumental painting of this time. The first phase is clearly Romanesque in style, which see. The most representative 13th century monument is the Church of Holy Trinity in the Castle of Berat, which have been subject of a number of scholarly studies, which established its affiliation to the group of works of Paleolog and Renaissance. The stylistic study reveals close analogies also to the Church of St. Clement in Ohrid. The emphasis on monastic saints and subsequently monasticism in the frescoes of this church alludes to the philomonastic policies of Andronikos Paleologos II and his milieu. Here are some of the paintings. and generally on the spiritual quest that gave birth to hesychasm. Another example of 30th century painting constitute the church of Peronti, the painting of the church of Peronti, the scene of on the eastern wall of the central nave above the arch of the apse, which can be defined most generally as a vision of the Last Judgment, is the one that is best preserved. Another ensemble of monuments built in the region of Korça and its environs refer to the continuation and succession of painting tradition in 14th century. The reverberation of the artwork of eminent workshops which worked in Berat clearly influenced the creation of small ateliers which operated under the changed social and political climate. The 14th century painters generally embraced the iconography and traits of Paleologan painting. The development of the trace of monumental painting of 14th century and the activity of different workshops can be traced in some monuments generally identified in the region of Korça and Prespa Lake. One of the workshops is identified, the activity of one of the workshops is identified in the Church of the Holy Virgin in Maligrad, Church of Annunciation, here, Church of Annunciation in Prespa Lake, and the Church of Christ Zozotis in Boria, which are attributed to the same artistic workshop which worked for different donors. Also, some of the artistic details which show have analogies in nearby churches, as at the Church of St. Athanasius in Castoria. Here, Bishop Nymphon is the donor of the Church of Christ Zozotes. Another atelier workshop is identified in Prespa Lake, in the hermit cave of the Church of the Virgin Gluboko, attributed to another eminent artistic personality named Alex. The particular importance of the fresco paintings of Gluboko relies in the fact that in the painted inscription in the bottom of the niche, with the image of Virgin Glycophilusa, the painter reveals his identity and details of his artistic education by vaunting himself in his signature as disciple of John the Zograph, which was also Metropolitan of Zerzem. In the southernmost part of Albania, in the village of Chertsk, another monument is located, of 14th century, the Church of St. Mary. This monument is an important religious and cultural asset for the region, and especially Leskovic and its environs. The interior of the building preserves mural paintings of outstanding historical and artistic values, which are among the most interesting of late Paleologan painting in the region, and show close affinities with the church of St. George Tuvunu in Castoria. The above-mentioned tableau of religious monuments and their complex iconography reflects the great potential that this category has to the familiarization and presentation of tourists with the history and culture of one particular country. Through the identification and exploration of these impressive constructions of their architecture and painting contribute to the perception of the rich cultural heritage preserved in the Albanian territory, as well as to the factors which conditioned the development of the cities, such as Durrës, Vlora, Berat, Korça, which became a favorite shelter for members of local aristocracy and the main historical scene where took place the most important historical events of the time. The architectural diversity and different styles that permeated the art of painting and the art of painting are expressions of the location of Albanian territory in the midst of crossroads between East and West, where took place the exchange of goods and products, but also of ideas. The character and traits of the mural painting interpret the cultural relations with important religious and cultural centers such as Constantinople and later with Ohrid and Castoria, and reflects in the same time the presence of different workshops and eminent masters of the period. Generally, the presence of the large number of churches makes evidence to the impression that in the past this territory was permeated by a strong and deep religious feeling. It's actually something common that we share I believe, in Balkan countries during this period. From this point of view, we may elaborate and explore new options and new creative ways to properly propagate this heritage, and probably integrating Albanian religious monuments, those who are not very popular and visited by now, in a spiritual Balkan tour. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your wonderful paper with wonderful monuments. Now the next paper is by Dr. Panagiotis Voulellis, Transition of Tourism Sustainability in Island Areas, the case study of Santorini Island. Dr. Voulellis is urban planner.
So, okay, good morning to all. My name is Voulellis Panagiotis. I'm an urban planner specializing in the concept of sustainable development. In relation to my current presentation, I was asked by the Municipality of Kythera to present a very crucial topic about tourism and the need for transition, but in a more sustainable way by following the newest changes in regards to tourism, like EU Green Deal, Sustainable Development Goals, so on, as well as the actions implemented by the municipality with the aim of adopting a new model of sustainable development in order to face critical problems related to infrastructure, to the natural and cultural environment, and to also manage tourist flows during the off-tourist season. Starting my presentation, I would like to point out that we are in a difficult period due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has significantly modified tourism destinations, and certainly the next day will always bring something new. It's worth to notice that according to the latest data from the World Tourism Organization, the pandemic led to a 73% global fall that led to a drop in international tourist arrivals in 2020 and so on in 2021. The World Tourism Organization stimulated the importance of developing a new finance architecture to adopt and build innovative, low-carbon, circular, safe, and inclusive business policies and instruments for recovery. At the same time, we ought to emphasize the importance of international cooperation and harmonization of policies for the purpose of restarting international tourism, and then to monitor and guide the future growth to ensure the sector deliver on its potential to drive sustainable development. The tourist development of an area is a very crucial reference point, not only for the economic sustainability of the residents, but also for the entire area. Especially, as all we know in Greece, tourism is the focal point of the economic sector, supporting the local communities of the island destination. Moreover, the lack of organized urban plan with designed land occupation and combined with the lack of strategic planning for all tourist destinations present the particularly high risk of degradation of a tourist area and the backlash to the natural and cultural environment and the local society. Case in point, the major problems that the tourist development of a destination site without sustainable planning faces are, we can see in this point, this destruction of natural and habitat loss, pressure on the resources of the area, loss of the cultural identity of the community, growth of aggression and crime rates, congested human vehicle traffic, increased prices on goods and services, dependence on tourism, increased pollution, destruction of historical monuments and natural landmarks. All these problems can be dealt with through the right planning for each destination site, with the end goal being the successful sustainability of tourism development. So, sustainable development has been defined as the growth model that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability to meet the needs of future generations. All of us, we know this definition from the Brundtland report. However, the year 2015 has been a milestone for global development, as governments have adopted the Agenda 2030 for sustainable development, along with the Sustainable Development Goals. We could argue that with the Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the specialization of the norm economy, society, environment was done. According to the World Tourism Organization, sustainable tourism is the tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social, environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and host communities. Sustainable tourism development guidelines and management practices are applicable to all forms of tourism in all types of destination sites, including mass tourism and various niche tourism segments. Sustainability principles refer to the environmental, economic, and social cultural aspects of tourism development, and a suitable balance must be established. It's very important. This must be established between these three dimensions to guarantee its long-term sustainability. The sustainable tourism should make optimal use of environmental resources that constitute a key element in tourism development, maintaining essential ecological process and helping to conserve natural heritage and biodiversity. Respect the social cultural authenticity of host communities, conserve their built and living cultural heritage and traditional values, and contribute to intercultural understanding and tolerance. Ensure viable long-term economic operation, providing social economic benefits to all stakeholders that are fairly distributed, including stable employment and income earning opportunities to the social services, to host communities, and contribute to poverty alleviation. Sustainable tourism development requires the informed participation of all relevant stakeholders, as well as strong political leadership to ensure wide participation and consensus building. Achieving sustainable tourism is a continuous process, and it requires constant monitoring of impacts, introducing the necessary preventive and collective measure whenever it's necessary. Sustainable tourism also maintain a high level of tourism satisfaction and ensure a meaningful experience to the tourist, raising their awarenesses about sustainability issues and promoting sustainable tourism practices amongst them. So, in this point, I would like to give a very good paradigm about Santorini. So, it is a fact that Santorini, with its unique natural and cultural environment, attracts a significant number of visitors, making it a global destination. However, in a short period of time, and mainly, this is very important, Santorini is facing significant problems, which include significant population growth, major traffic and parking problem, arbitrary construction, increased percentage of settlement construction, degradation of agricultural land, insufficient infrastructure, lack of tourist management at the destination site, 0 degree of renewable energy sources development, a low-level cultural heritage promotion and protection, environmental degradation due to unmonitored operation of the waste disposal site. In recent years, before the period of pandemic, it's very important to refer in this, these problems have led to intense pressure on the natural and cultural environment, as well as on the residents of the municipality themselves. However, the municipal authority, realizing this intense pressure, and especially the mayor of Santorini, Antonis Sigalas, which led to a significant degradation not only of the natural environment, but also of the tourist product itself, and in cooperation with the government, drafted a strategic plan, the implementation of which will lead to significant social, environmental, and economic benefits for all residents of the municipality. So, I will present you 20 actions that Santorini the action of the municipality in order to achieve sustainable tourism development, which include, as already said, government support for the rapid completion of Santorini strategic plan, completion of spatial planning of the municipality, integrate waste management. It is particularly important that the municipality has already ensured European funding so that the uncontrolled waste disposal area will permanently close, and a definitive and innovative solution for integration of waste management is found. Digital transformation of the municipality. It is expected that with in few days, I would like to say, or in the next month, the municipality will join the European funding from the digitization of the entire archive of urban planning and technical service, the electronic interconnection of services with citizens and visitors for immediate information, a new and integrated geographical information systems, as we all know, GIS system, the recording of population flows. This is very important, with aim at their proper management, thus reducing the consumption of municipal vehicles with significant economic and environmental benefits and other innovative digital actions. Sustainable urban planning, urban mobility plan. Completion within 2022 for the most part of traffic studies with emphasis on the sustainable mobility plan. Controls for arbitrary construction and reduction of aggravating uses in settlements with high construction percentages. Completions of critical infrastructure such as the new airport. Protection and promoting of the unique cultural heritage, strategic cooperation with the Ministry of Culture. Destination management organization and observatory for sustainable tourism development. Each operation is expected after the adoption of the new law of the Ministry of Tourism. Networking with educational institutions for the promotion of environmental awarenesses. A strategic cooperation with the National Technical University of Athens, with the environmental organization and other international bodies for the promotion of actions against climate change. Development of electromobility. We have a European funding about that, almost. Utilization of European funding. The municipality has already planned action and networking with the European Union for its participation in funding programs such as Horizon Life and so on. Protection and development of agricultural crops. The municipality, through the completion of spatial planning, aims for the effective protection of agricultural crops with a clear definition of protection area. Energy saving action. The municipality has already indeed collaboration with various agencies to promote the energy upgrade of public buildings, collaboration with the Ministry of Environment and Energy at Erasmus project, e-building capacity, with the name e-building capacity of public administration towards meeting public building stock renovation challenges. Is in the line with the program of Europe with the renovation wave at Green Deal. Completion and upgrade of the water supply network. Determination of population size over time and territory as the measure has announced. Increased policing and monitoring, integration of the municipality and European networks in order to promote action for the reduction of climate change impacts. The municipality of Santorini wants to participate in the EU program of 100 neutral cities with significant economic and technical support benefits. Development of renewable energy development of renewable energy sources, collaborate with experts to assess areas for the development of renewable energy sources, cooperation with the Ministry of Environment and Energy in the framework of implementation of spatial plans. Finally, operation of a business center. This is very important. Within the next month, the integration of the municipality in European financing is expected for the creation of an innovative and modern business center with the aim of proper monitoring of the implementation of the strategic plan of Santorini. Achieving sustainable tourism development requires rational, strategic planning with actions that will work therapeutically on the critical environment, social, and economic problems of an area. It therefore requires planning, dedication to the goal networking with the competent bodies, and mainly training of the local community for the benefits that can be enjoyed from such a new development model. Closing this presentation, I would like to say that Santorini and its stakeholders have the opportunity to function as a really good practice of adopting a new model of sustainable tourism development with significant social, environmental, and economic benefits for both the current generation, but mainly for future ones. Please excuse me, but my attendance is needed in another meeting, so I will name to bid you farewell.
Thank you very much. As we can see, the problems are everywhere the same. We have to make an order. So, thank you once again. And now we have the next paper, Rigas Zafeiriou and Dr. Nikos Georgiadis, Kythera Trails, linking the protection of cultural and natural heritage through integrated destination management, theory to action.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be among you, even from a distance. I'm actually going to take you to a short voyage to Kythera Island. But before starting to go forth with the slides, I would like to say that this picture right there on the cover actually encapsulates in a nutshell what we have achieved so far. So this photo was taken in April. You can see a group of hikers. They come from the Netherlands, and actually they are just approaching one of the major cultural heritage sites of Kythera Island, which is Xhaferaj, the medieval capital of the island. So where is Kythera? Kythera is in between of Eastern and Central Mediterranean. I'm zooming in Greece. It's actually at the confluence of three seas, the Aegean, the Ionian, and the Cretan, and it's in between Peloponnese and Crete. And all this has created a very unique cultural identity that is very visible in the architecture, in the monuments, but also in the local idiom, the songs, the dances, and all the intangible heritage of the island. So our involvement on the island of Kythera has been because we wanted to test the in-create approach. But what is the in-create approach? The in-create approach is at the heart of Medina's work because the Mediterranean Institute for Nature and Anthropos is really looking at the nexus between human society and nature. So this in-create approach is actually answers to the urgent need for a practical toolbox and how to integrate culture, the cultural elements into nature conservation. So not looking purely at nature conservation, but also taking into account also the cultural elements of an area. So it consists of 6 steps, starting with the baseline work and rapid assessments of the natural environment, the cultural environment, specifically at the 4th step, looking at the linkages between nature and culture, doing a stakeholder analysis, and then there is the final step, the management, design, and planning. At the 4th step, we're looking at the linkage between nature and culture, lies the IM&C. It's an online tool that people can use, and actually it looks like this. So you can put all your data from the rapid assessments, and you can find the positive and negative relations between cultural elements and natural elements, and you can rank them, and you can prioritize also the needs for conservation at a given area. And there you see also the fuzzy mapping on top. I'm going to take you right to step 6 because of the lack of time. What we did is at the final stage we put all the things together, what we found on Kythera Island, and actually the main economic driver, the natural hazards, and also a lot of the problems that the local community faces, like out-migration, which is typical, the rural exodus as everywhere in remote areas like Kythera, aging population, land abandonment, and all the other factors. And we decided to work on tourism because we identified tourism both as an opportunity and a threat. And tourism on Kythera actually has a slight but steady growth. And actually, you can think of Kythera as a miniature case of the conventional 3S model, sea, sun, and sand, with a very short peak season in July and August, spatial concentration in few locations, mainly at the coastline of the island, and as such, the local businesses, the viability of the local businesses is stressed, but also the natural resources and especially water. And actually, we realized that tourism on Kythera is at crossroads, and we wanted to answer this very basic question. What type of development do we want, and for whom are going to be the benefits? And we came up with the idea of building a trails network, and we like to work a lot with the notion of experiential travel. In the age of over-tourism, as we heard before the presentation about Santorini. So we want to create a different model, and everything we do boils down to the experience of the traveler on the island of Kythera. That's why we want to use this terminology, and later on you're going to see why also. And we built the trail network, and of course it's under the umbrella of adventure tourism, which has three basic elements. Cultural immersion, so people come in contact with the local community, interacting with nature, of course, and it requires some kind of physical activity, even if it's light adventure. And it's a slow type of traveling. And actually, adventure tourism already represents almost a third of the global tourism expenditures. And as such, we no longer perceive it as niche or alternative tourism. We believe that is counterproductive. We perceive this as being the new tourism, or to be more exact, part of the new and contemporary tourism milieu. And considering adventure tourism, hiking is by far the most popular activity, and it's actually very logical because hiking is accessible to everyone of all age groups, is a light activity, does not require special skills or technical abilities, does not require special tools and equipment. So, and actually is the best way to discover a new territory. And also adventure tourism is very good because a big part of the tourism expenditure really stays in the local economy. Which for us is a very important thing. So, for example, studies have found that in order to generate $10,000 in the local economy, it takes more than 90 cruise tourists, it takes 9 overnight package tourists, but only 4 adventure travelers to generate that money. And again, this is very logical because adventure travelers tend to stay longer at the destination. They are more interested in the local products, the more authentic experience. So a lot of their money goes to the real local economy, 65%, in contrast with only 14% of the mass tourism. So going back to our approach, we realized that we need to have broad local collaborations. That's why we collaborated with the Kythera Foundation for Culture and Development, which is the lead organization, that the Municipality of Kythera, and the Domestic Estate Management Committee, which is the landowner of Kythera. And this is where we are at the moment. We built 11 trails of 100 kilometers in total, and 1 via ferrata. Why trails? This is a very recent photo, by the way. Because we consider it as a low-cost green infrastructure. It's a nature-based solution and no-regret solution for sustainable tourism. And by recovering the old trails, because we are working with the old traditional trails of the island, and we are valorizing natural and cultural landscapes. We promote points of interest of cultural and natural heritage. Of course, the trails are paths to nature, and they represent cultural values because they are the old trails. By that, because hiking occurs mostly in spring and autumn, we flattened the spike of this very short tourist season that we have. So it's a shoulder season tourism. And we actually accomplished to use smartly the existing tourism infrastructure. We don't need to build new hotels and new restaurants. They are already there, and we use them off-season. And by that, we promote sustainable livelihoods, and we trigger community-based conservation. And you're going to see later how. Trail design is very important because we are trying to combine all trails that actually are showcasing the richness of the island, the cultural richness and the natural richness. Here is a picture of the trailhead signs we just installed. And a very important part of our work with the Mediterranean Institute is to really register all the points of cultural and natural heritage. We have done an exhaustive recording of 425 points of interest. And we combine that with more than 45 in-depth individual interviews with local elderly people of the island in order to recover the local knowledge that are associated with those trails, but also the traditional practices of the areas and so on and so forth. And all that, not just to record it, but also to tell stories like this one. For example, on the trail, you will find these weird kind of holes in the ground next to the trail, but these are actually not just holes. They used to be lime kilns. And this is an actual photo of a Kytherian lime kiln in the past where people used to produce lime. So, and this story, actually, you can have it while you walk. And I'm very happy today because just today we launched the application, the smartphone app for Kythera Trails. So you can read these stories, you get notified by your smartphone, and you can read this story. So not only that, we are also taking care of the sustainability of the whole project, and we have been using the Green Flag Trail system for sustainable management. And by using that, we have the first trails in Europe certified with this certification in collaboration with the World Trails Network and Paths of Greece. We also did more innovations, just briefly a couple of them. We have the first Via Ferrata in a small Greek island. Is some kind of combination of hiking and climbing with some minimal infrastructure. And we are also working along with the local community. We have organized more than 80 free guided tours with the local community. Actually, they are the most kind of popular winter events on Kythera at the moment, sometimes with more than 100 people joining us. And we are celebrating all together the trails of the island. Another innovation has been the restoration of the traditional microdams of Kythera Island, with the local called Voulellis. So in the past, people used to build these small dams along the stream in order to collect water and use it in various ways. Again, we believe because Kythera, as other Greek islands, has a water shortage. The water resources are depleting, also from climate change, but also from tourism in the peak season, as I told you before. So we consider this project very important. And we again, it's an affordable, small-scale, simple solution. It's connected with the local cultural values. It's a green infrastructure, and actually is fully integrated in the trail network. So actually, when you walk, like you see in the picture, you can read again the stories of what is a microdam and how people were using that in the past, and the traditional water management practices. Again, the positive impacts are many, supporting biodiversity, farming, wildlife, but most importantly, recharging the aquifer. We have done a lot of marketing and networking. We are a member of the World Trade Network. We participated in most international conferences. We have worked with the National Channel of France, being part of their documentary about Greece, and so on and so forth, magazine articles and international exhibitions. Most importantly, maybe we have twinned with 2 other trails in Japan and in Canada, Bruce Trail Conservancy, one of the most important trails in the world. And we see the whole thing as a destination, not just a hiking trails network. And we need to collaborate all together in order to achieve a sustainable tourism development. So including hotels, of course, the trails, the organizations, hikers, ambassadors, and so forth. Here is, for example, an example of the last year, a campaign we did in order to raise awareness about the cultural values of the trails. And we collaborated with all these local organizations that you see. We have also, for us, it's important the capacity building on the island. And of course, there is a need for guides also along the trails. So we've been, we organize this vocational training in collaboration with Interpret Europe for actually, because we believe that guides are really the catalyst in visitors' experiences, again, about experience. We want to promote this more interactive experiential guiding on the island. One thing that is happening the last 2 years is trail adoption. So local associations in villages of the island, and not only that, but also tourist businesses, they are starting to adopt the trails and take care of them, as you see in the pictures. And finally, this is the last 2 years, we have set a 5-step maintenance and improvement process for the trails so that they are always in top operational capacity, which begins with and updating the maps, auditing trails, guiding the workers, maintaining the actual maintenance work, and then, of course, the closing. So thank you very much, and I welcome you to the world of Kythera Trails. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, following the tradition of 15 minutes academic delay, I would propose, if there are some questions, to be short and the answers to be short, if there are some questions. No. Then we propose the coffee break to be only 15 minutes.